in So our program today is centered on Micron, as you all know, and it was an important week in the whole Micron story for Central New York and America, with the notification that the Department of Commerce has agreed to fund the Central New York project to the tune of $4.6 billion. That's been done. And with that, the release of the community impact report that Commerce issued that sets forth requirements that they are placing on Micron as a contingent for the funding. Our panelists today will touch on this. Dick Kornbluth, our first panelist, who is a board member of Central New York Solidarity Coalition, will be first up, and he will touch on that uh, community impact report. Our second speaker will be Khadeejah Ahmad, who is the Central New York coordinator for Jobs to Move America, and she will talk to us about their efforts with respect to the Micron project and their Good Jobs platform, particularly. And then finally, we'll hear from Tylah Worrell, Executive Director of the Urban Jobs Task Force, to give us her perspective on the Micron project. It's a lot to cover. I will say that Caroline Castile, who had been working in the Central New York project for Jobs to Move America, has moved on to other endeavors for Jobs to Move America, so she won't be joining us today. But I'm sure you will find that our panels today will provide that information, and we, as usual, look forward to a robust discussion and question and answers after our three panelists have had a chance to make their initial presentations. So I suppose, and I might, at the risk of forgetting about a lot of the housekeeping rules, I want to just remember to say, please keep your microphone muted unless you're recognized to unmute. And you can put a question in the chat. I'm hoping that we wait till the end of the presentations to address questions, although there may be some that at the end of each speaker that need to be addressed. So we'll play that by ear as we go. And all right, with the hope that I haven't missed something important to tell you, I am going to turn it over to our first speaker today, Dick Kornbluth.
Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep, you could maximize yours. There you go. Looks good.
Everybody can see this?
Yes.
Okay. So just to set the context of this presentation and what we're doing today, there's really two major sides to Micron. One is obviously the economic side, which has to do with community benefits, especially with workforce development, et cetera. And the other is the sustainability side, which has to do with the environmental issues. We are really going to focus today on the workforce issue, where the strengths are in the Micron agreements, both with the federal government and with the state, and where the weaknesses are, and with a proposal to try to fill the holes in where the weaknesses are. So there will be a separate future presentation on the whole sustainability issue which is going to be centered around the NEPA process, which will occur hopefully in the next month or so, and the seeker process, which is the state side of the environmental review. But today we're really going to talk about workforce development and talk about the dollars that are being spent and the issues around that. So first, Micron just signed a contract with the Department of Commerce and received $6.1 billion in grants, plus, according to the Glencoin's wonderful reporting, possibly billions more in tax credits from the CHIPS Act, along with low interest loan benefits, et cetera. In return for that, Micron is required to commit to, quote, create good paying jobs that benefit American workers, including economically disadvantaged individuals and communities underrepresented in the industry. That is a sort of general requirement for the distribution of CHIPS Act funds to chip manufacturers. I'm going to focus in specifically on Micron's deal with the Department of Commerce, however. One of the guiding principles that has underlay the rearrangements and the contracts between the federal government and chips manufacturers and possibly other grantees from the federal government is what's called a good principles framework. And there are eight points in that good principles framework, which I'm going to go over very quickly now. I've bold-faced things that I thought are really relevant to Central New York and to the issues that we're talking about. Under recruitment and hiring, qualified applicants are actively recruited, including those from underserved communities. These are actual quotes from the document itself. Applicants are free from discrimination. They are evaluated with relevant skills-based requirements, and unnecessary educational credentials and experience requirements are minimized. Under benefits, full-time and part-time workers are provided family-sustaining benefits, and there is actually a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility section, which I've left the details out, but the general view is that all workers have equal opportunity. Under skills and career advancement, there are equitable opportunities and tools to progress to future good jobs within the organization, that workers have transparent promotion or advancement opportunities, and they have access to quality employer or labor management provided training and education. So those are the first four bullet points of this framework. The second four have focus on job security and working conditions. Workers have safe, healthy, and accessible workplace. They have job security without arbitrary or discriminatory discipline or dismissal. They have adequate hours and predictable schedules. They are free from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation at work. I won't go through the last two. Under organizational culture, all workers belong, are valued, contribute meaningfully to the organization, and are engaged and respected, especially by leadership. Under the pay provisions of the framework, all workers are paid a stable and predictable living wage before overtime, tips, and commissions. Their pay is fair, transparent, equitable. Their wages increase as their skills and experience increase. And finally, empowerment and representation. Workers can form and join unions. Workers can engage in protected, concerted activity without fear of retaliation. Workers contribute to decisions about their work, how it is performed, and organizational direction. What's interesting about this one, because I'm going to talk more about that in a little while, is that is a critical factor in the framework, in the Good Jobs framework. As we know, Biden has been a strong promoter of unionization and has made it a central core of his whole economic improvement in this country. The problem is that the Good Jobs framework is not mandatory. According to the CHIPS Workforce Development Planning Guide, quote, CHIPS incentive program applicants are expected to incorporate aspects of this framework into their workforce development plans. What is important about this statement is that, in other words, there is no actual requirement that CHIPS incentive program applicants implement all of the provisions of the Good Jobs platform, the Good Jobs framework. So they get to choose within, I assume, some boundaries that the Department of Commerce will review, are expected to incorporate at least some aspects of this framework, but are not expected to incorporate all of it. So they are given basically a escape valve if they find some of those provisions of the Good Jobs framework to be unacceptable or difficult, or they decide that they don't want to implement them. And so we're going to get back to this later. So what is in the agreement between Micron and the Department of Commerce? Well, the Department of Commerce will invest $65 million dedicated to workforce development, and they've created a structure for how that money will get spent. And that creates some interesting dialogue locally because of the work of the Community Engagement Committee and supposedly their $500 million that they are going to be distributing, or at least approving to be spent in similar ways. But so it's not clear how these two things will work together. The structure that was created with the Department of Commerce is that the money would be invested through a workforce intermediary, and that workforce intermediary will be required to consult with stakeholders to include education and training providers, labor unions, state and local workforce development boards, child care organizations, and community-based organizations. Through this collaboration, Micron and its intermediaries will, quote, create recruiting pathways to good jobs for the surrounding community, especially for economically disadvantaged individuals. This is a quote taken from the Micron Community Impact Statement, which was released like 2 days ago. So who will that intermediary be? Well, the actual lead intermediary, which is the intermediary for both New York and the Idaho project, is the Central New York Community Foundation. The regional intermediary, which would be the specific intermediary that would be dealing with Central New York, is going to be Center State CEO. So one of the aspects of this will be a registered apprenticeship program, which will assist and propel underrepresented individuals to earn, quote, earn and learn, and provide pathway to well-paying careers. We are talking now not about the construction phase, but about the actual worker and employment phase at the plant itself. And the Department of Commerce has established a partnership with the Manufacturers Association of Central New York. So MACNY will be overseeing the apprenticeship programs for the workers who will be working in the plant. And the goal is to hire up to 20 apprentices a year. Given the fact that Micron is talking about ultimately 9,000 workers over 20 years, if you divide by 4, you're talking approximately 12 to 1,500 workers a year. We're talking about an additional 20 apprentices working in the plant a year. It's not a game-changing number, but it's a start. So other Micron commitments on education, interestingly enough, a lot of those details have actually been under the New York Green CHIPS Act agreement. Under construction workforce, that the projects will operate under project labor agreements, which Micron has already signed with construction unions, with trade unions, and the New York PLA has to emphasize registered apprenticeships and hiring veterans and local workers. And they've been instructed to use the Pathways to Apprenticeship program, which is a program under Syracuse Build, to create apprentices for the trades. Micron will expand access and services for construction workers by undertaking efforts to maintain or enter into bids from contractors that make financial contributions to the registered apprenticeship programs, encourage partnerships with pre-apprenticeship programs that support individuals who do not have access to or familiarity with such programs, and work with contractors to identify and recruit candidates from economically disadvantaged populations. So all of this sounds really good, except for, at this point, clearly the hole in this support program is actually at the level of unionization of the plan, which is going to be an issue coming up in our presentations today. And if I move to the New York Green Chips Act and the Onondaga County incentives, the Micron term sheet is an agreement between Micron, Empire State Development, Onondaga County, and the Onondaga County Industrial Development Authority. Under the Empire State Development, Micron received $5.5 billion over the term if Micron meets job and investment requirements of the Empire State Development Incentive Schedule under the Excelsior Jobs Program. And under that, Empire State Development will contribute $200 million for New York State to construct roadway improvements for phase 1 to New York State Route 31. And I believe that includes the off-ramp from Route 81 that's being built directly to Route 31 to create access to the plant. Onondaga County is putting up $5 million for a facade grant, improvements in on-site structure, $5 million for a workforce attraction grant to, quote, assist with initial hiring during the startup of the fab, $10 million investment in conjunction with Syracuse University to establish a semiconductor R&D initiative at the Center of Excellence, $5 million for a workforce sustainability grant, $1 billion improvements to wastewater treatment and reclaimed water, which is going to be a wastewater treatment plant at or near the site of the fab, $30 million from reinvestment in the purchase price into the fab complex site, and $300 million in property savings from a 39-year payment in lieu of taxes. Aqua will provide water. Public transport will be extended to the site. Micron will install a bus stop at there, and there will be road expansion and improvements to Corduroy Road made by the county. So under the term sheet agreement, there are specific DEI goals, which are increase representation of underrepresented groups, drive equitable pay and inclusive benefits, strengthen culture of inclusion, advocate for racial and LGBTQ plus equality, engage with diverse financial institutions for cash management, increase representation and spend with diverse suppliers. So then the question becomes, how will that take place, and where will the commitments be to fulfill the shared DEI goals that are in the contract or the term sheet between Micron, the state, and the county? There is what's called a community benefits agreement. I'm putting that in quotes for a specific reason. There will be a Green Chips Community Fund. Micron will put in $250 million over 20 years. The state will put in another $150 million over 20 years. And supposedly there'll be another $100 million that will be generated from other sources. And that will be used to develop the local workforce, invest in education, promote affordable housing, and provide additional benefits to CNY communities. My understanding is, and I don't know how this is borne out, is that this is a total of about $500 million over 20 years, and that money will be, if not controlled by, but at least recommended that money will be distributed according to the work done by the Community Engagement Committee. So I don't know really where that stands at this point, or if that's actually going to happen that way. So getting into the details of this, I think this is important. These are quotes from the Community Investment Framework regarding workforce development. Micron will work with state and local partners and construction contractors and subcontractors to establish a target percentage of the construction workforce to be from disadvantaged populations. Micron will encourage contractors to conduct focused recruiting and pipeline development activities to strive in good faith to meet the target, and Micron will require contractors to report their results. The final goal will be established in consultation with the, quote, Community Advisory Committee, which is now called the Community Engagement Committee, and documented under a Green Chips Community Plan. What's important in this statement is the language, and the language has phrases that occur throughout this document, such as encouraging and striving in good faith. Striving in good faith does not mean commitment. It means we'll give it a shot, we'll do our best, but there's no guarantee of any performance results as in that language whatsoever. Micron will establish a target percentage of permanent hires for facility operations to be made from targeted census tracts and historically disadvantaged populations. They will conduct focused recruiting and pipeline development activities, and they will strive using good faith efforts to meet the target. Once again, that same language pops up, that language which is not strong in terms of actually understanding any sort of commitment or actual goal setting and agreement to reach those goals. The final goal will be from eligible categories under SEDI, priority given to MWBEs and SDVOBs, which is veterans. We'll use good faith efforts. The language appears over and over again to achieve 20% of eligible annual operating spend with diverse suppliers. We'll commit to investing in regional supplier diversity. We'll require applicable tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to establish goals. And once again, it's good faith efforts. They will encourage construction contractors to use Syracuse Build, which has the Pathways to Apprenticeship program. Once again, encouraging. They will commit to employing measures and programming to increase construction contracting and work participation by underrepresented populations. And finally, in education and workforce, this is actually consonant with the federal agreement that with the contract that they have with the Department of Commerce. There's basically it's the same basic language there. They invest 10 million in STEAM. Micron and Empire State Development will partner and invest in New York Higher Educational to develop curriculum and facilities for training, subsidize building and maintenance of a child care facility. There is an entire section in the Micron Community Investment program at the federal level on child care facilities, which I did not cover earlier. And they will provide incentives for use of public transport and install a public bus stop. This is all stuff that is actually mirrored in the federal agreement with the Department of Commerce. Micron will work with the Community Engagement or Advisory Committee to facilitate solicitation of projects to be funded by the Community Investment Fund. They will locate a senior corporate executive. They'll invest 10 million in partnership with the regional tech ecosystem and actively support smart growth in the region through steering suppliers to existing business parks and areas with existing infrastructure, et cetera. So I'm just going to move ahead. What's wrong with this picture? Well, at the federal level, according to the Department of Commerce Community Impact Statement, Micron has agreed to much of the Good Jobs framework with at least one notable exception: no agreement to allow workers to form and join unions. At the state level, the agreement between Micron and ESD ties the $5.5 billion grant to Micron meeting its commitments in the community investment framework, except the language only requires Micron to make good faith efforts to meet the requirements with no definition of what that means. Micron has already signed project labor agreements for the construction of the fab. We know nothing about the language of those agreements. It is not clear that Micron will even be required to report that information or that information will become public. And finally, the language of the Federal CHIPS Act grant of $6.1 billion specifically says that the recipient is not required to disclose any information related to the award to the public. So what do we do to fix it? The only way to ensure that Micron will act in the best interest of the community in general and the disadvantaged communities in particular is through a binding agreement between Micron and the community. The binding agreement, which is a community benefits agreement, needs to be between Micron and a legal entity that has the power and authority to sign and enforce the agreements. And the organization that is spearheading this effort in Central New York is Jobs to Move America and the IWE-CWE union. And that is the point where Khadeejah takes over.
So, hi everyone, I'm Khadeejah Ahmad. I am the Syracuse-based organizing manager for this Micron work, and I'm working for Jobs to Move America, which is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. It's really a strategic policy center that looks at public spending and corporate behavior. And when massive amounts of public money is being spent on a company like Micron, Jobs to Move America really is just trying to make sure that the most public good comes out of these public funds and the least harm.
Khadeejah, could you maximize your screen? Down at the bottom, the little icon? Yeah, just where you were, either one. Or just increase the size.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Okay. So Jobs to Move America has joined Urban Jobs Task Force and CNY Solidarity and a few other local organizations to create a working group that outlined a platform highlighting sort of what we would like to see come out of these jobs and how we define good jobs. So the platform was jointly created with Jobs to Move America. Our union partners are IUE-CWA. Our community partners are Urban Jobs Task Force and CNY Solidarity. And we've also had support from Citizen Action, as well as the Greater Syracuse Labor Council. We've produced a platform that can be signed on by organizations. So we're looking for endorsement, public endorsement by organizations. We have over 42 so far. And that same platform can also be signed on by individuals in the community. So we're looking for support as individuals, but also from organizations. The language in the platform is the same, but it's two different websites that host it for the community sign-on versus the organizations that want to sign on. So that's what we mean by two documents produced. I'll be sharing the link to both of those for everyone here on the call. So in the platform, we define what is a good job. A good job is one where workers have a fair and clear process to organize a union without employer opposition. So we've clearly written that out as one of our asks of Micron in order for these jobs to be good jobs for Central New York. We also are asking that these jobs be family-sustaining wages, comprehensive benefits, safe working conditions, equitable hiring and employment practices, and also to make sure that there's an accessible workforce pipeline created for these jobs. So to get into a little bit about the unionizing piece, the platform asks that Micron sign a labor peace agreement. So labor peace would mean that Micron would agree to remain neutral if the workers choose to come together and form a union. They'll recognize and bargain with the union if a majority of the workers sign the cards expressing that they want union representation, and that will ensure a path to a first contract. Regarding family-sustaining wages, Micron has a responsibility to pay its workers so that they and their families can thrive and that the local economy can in turn benefit from Micron's presence. A good job is one that includes a family-sustaining wage. Dick was kind enough to do some research to include what Central New York living hourly wages are for an adult with 0 to 3 children and also for 2 adults. So here's a chart. A living wage would be $20.99 an hour for one adult with no child. For two working adults, a living wage would be $14.48 per hour if they didn't have children. This data is from MIT from February of this year. So comprehensive benefits would include robust medical insurance, paid time off, retirement, and also assistance for childcare to ensure that caring for children doesn't become a barrier or an obstacle to a good job. Safe working conditions. Now, this is so important because Micron's conditions and the clean rooms are very, potentially hazardous and dangerous. So we are asking Micron to commit to implementing state-of-the-art health and safety protocols. Also to engage the workers themselves in the development and implementation of robust safety and health programs, including a joint health and safety committee, and including joint health and safety committee guidance developed by the Clean Electronics Production Network. We're asking Micron to educate and train the workers about the hazards of the chemicals that they'll be handling and to phase out and safely substitute PFAS, which are forever chemicals, to replace chemicals that can cause cancer, miscarriages, fetal brain damage, or persistent bioaccumulative and toxic. And also to replace inadequate or permissible exposure limits with strong health protective exposure standards where no safer substitutes exist yet for hazardous chemicals. Equitable hiring and employment practices. So we're asking Micron to agree to a meaningful percentage of new hires to come from marginalized communities, particularly within Syracuse. Once they're hired, Micron must foster an inclusive environment based in cultural competence, such as internal trainings on inclusion and implicit bias, and clear guidelines on what cultural competence looks like in practice. Sorry, I need to move this. Workers should have opportunities for ongoing trainings and development and to hone their skills in a highly technical environment. And also to ensure that these priorities extend to jobs created by contractors engaged by Micron. The contractor selection process should be quality-based rather than price-based. Ideally, this would occur through enforceable community workforce agreements. Okay, diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce with accessible workforce pipeline. What do we mean by that? We want Micron to commit to this by supporting the creation of workforce development pipelines that intentionally target our most disadvantaged residents. Invest in new and existing workforce development programs free of barriers to access like GED requirements, English language proficiency requirements, and also discrimination against workers who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. Invest in the expansion of available affordable childcare options in the region, and partner with unions and community groups to create and institute a robust paid pre-apprenticeship program that is promoted by Micron within the Central New York community. Transportation accessibility. Micron has a responsibility to create transportation out to its facilities so that Central New York workers can actually get to these jobs. And that transportation needs to be safe and reliable public transportation. Transparency and accountability. Micron must be transparent and accountable to its workforce development, equity, labor, occupational health and safety, and community commitments. The reporting should be made publicly accessible, and the people of Central New York deserve to know how their public funds are being spent. Micron workers deserve to know what commitments Micron has made about their jobs, including wage and benefits of each kind of job, and whether Micron is living up to those commitments. And Micron should regularly report on their status of their compliance with plan commitments on at least a quarterly basis. So that brings me to my call to action. I'm going to drop some links in the chat. But primarily everything that I'm going to ask for is going to be linked in this Google Doc. So my first call to action is that everyone please sign the petition as a member of the community. So I'm going to put that if I can. I guess I can't do this while I'm sharing, so I'm going to stop sharing and put it in the chat. So stop share to the whole group. Okay. So these should link. So the first link where it says, please sign the platform as an individual member of the community. I'm sure a lot of the folks in this room have already signed that platform, but if you haven't, please take a moment. It's an Action Network website that is set up for the community individuals to be able to sign this petition. The next ask I have is that if you're affiliated with an organization, if you could please ask your organization if it has shared values to publicly endorse this platform. That is a separate link, and that is the second link in there. It's a Google form where organizations can say, yes, you can say your name and say if you're authorized to sign on behalf of your organization. My third ask is that you please share this with your community and your friends and your family and your networks. That would be the community link that you share with them. If each person could commit to maybe, having 10 conversations around this and sharing this with 10 people that don't know about it, that would be a huge, huge help. So that's my ask of each of you. And lastly, that link should go to a Google Docs page where these links are listed for you to be able to reference at any point. I've also created like a clickable graphic that is Instagram and Facebook sized, but I'm in the process of getting it from my desktop to that document. I'm having some technical issues, but you'll be able to pull up that Google Doc at your convenience later, and any resources I have that can make it easier for you to share this petition, post about it on social media, should be found there. Any questions? Is the links working? Is particularly that first one, the one that is for the individuals to be able to sign on? Can someone confirm that it is indeed
Yeah,
working?
yeah, it
Okay.
lights up as it's able to be reached.
Fantastic. And then, if you could all open that Google Doc link so that you can save that for yourselves for referencing later. That links to the petition as a platform document where you can save it as a PDF, you can save it as a Word document, you can print it out if you want. And it also links to the community petition website as well as the organizational sign-on website. And it's also where I'll put any graphics that I can upload. Dick?
Thanks, Khadeejah. Presuming we can now move on to Tylah. And
Sorry.
so we need to make Tylah. I see Dick has got his hand up.
Yeah. Two quick comments before Tyler speaks. Number one, a lot of what is in the Good Jobs platform is almost taken virtually word for word from the federal government's Good Jobs framework. There's a long section on childcare and the Good Jobs framework, much longer. I didn't get into any of the details, but a lot of what's in there is actually promoted already within the federal Good Jobs framework. The second thing is the documents that I have found from the federal government and the Department of Commerce, including the framework and the workforce planning document. CNY Solidarity has a whole page dedicated to Micron, and we can put those documents or links to those documents into that Micron page so that you can actually access them yourselves. So we will work on making that happen.
Thank you, Dick. So Tyler's up next. In terms of hosting, Diane, do you need to do something, or does Khadeejah need to release the
I got a
co-host?
message from Tylah saying that I turned off her camera, but I didn't. So,
I
the
don't
challenge.
need the ability to host. I'm just going to speak.
Well,
So,
I'm going to give it. Oh, you don't need to share a screen?
correct.
Okay. I don't seem to have the ability to turn your camera on. That's
Okay, that's fine. In the interest of time, just because I'm unable to get my video on, if everyone's okay with it, I can just begin to speak.
That's fine, Tyler.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tylah Worrell. I am the Executive Director of Urban Jobs Task Force of Syracuse. It's a pleasure to be here in this space with you today. Our mission is to champion economic and racial justice, but specifically advocating for economic equitable opportunities for disadvantaged Syracuseans, mainly through policy and legislation. At Urban Jobs Task Force, we already have a track record of success. We were able to win 15% of local hire incentive goal for the I-81 project. Some of the current results for the advocacy that we had with this campaign is that we now have had over $3 million going to local workers on the project. 3 local trades have committed to removing the GED requirement as a direct result of our advocacy. And we were also written about in the Federal Highway Administration, notably that advocacy was a crucial component for the success for a major infrastructure project such as this. So the reason why we decided to co-anchor and join Jobs to Move America, along with the other partners on this platform, is that we're hoping that we can achieve similar results with this Micron project to break down systemic barriers. As it stands right now, we're facing a very critical moment. We're finding ourselves in a crucial juncture where Micron and government officials have made promises to bring thousands of jobs into central New York. And this is just quite frankly a chance that we just cannot ignore. We have to really sit down and ask ourselves, who's truly going to benefit from these jobs? See, at Urban Jobs Task Force, we're deeply concerned that without tangible commitments, current local residents will be left behind and excluded from a very, very potentially economic affluent opportunity that could uplift our community. And I'm sure I don't have to let you guys know, but we've experienced decades of disinvestment and broken promises. And Micron has been heralded as this potential economic uplift. However, with this recent announcement that they're securing billions of federal funds, we see this as alarming, mainly because of the gaps. We cannot rely on good intention alone. And so with where we're at right now, the silence for enforceable commitments for equitable access to these jobs is just quite frankly unacceptable. We already have nearly 50 community, civic, and faith organizations who are standing together unified with this vision. And it's a vision that insists that we have concrete measures to ensure the most marginalized, specifically local residents, women, Black, Indigenous, workers of color can access these jobs. So there's a threat to our community as it stands. This investment has the potential to either bridge the existing divides or to reinforce them. And I'll say that again. This investment has the potential to either bridge the existing divides or reinforce them. If Micron and our state leaders do not act now to set reasonable workforce equity goals, vulnerable community members risk being sidelined once again. And so it's our responsibility to ensure that these jobs are not just created, but they are, in fact, good jobs, jobs that support families, respect workers, and protect health. So I'm mainly here today to reinforce everything that Dick and Khadeejah have said throughout this presentation. I want to reinforce Khadeejah's call to action, and I might even take it a step further. In addition to you signing today to the petition and telling people about the platform, I'm trying to get you to commit yourselves individually to get at least 10 more people to sign onto the platform or organizations to strengthen and let people know this is what the community wants. We want commitments for people who currently live here to have access to the jobs as we have been promised. I really believe that together we can turn this moment of uncertainty into one of opportunity for us and for our neighbors and for the future of our community. And I like to keep things short and simple. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and your commitment. Let's ensure that we seize this opportunity so that no one is left behind as we build a brighter future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tylah, for your insightful remarks here. We will open it up to questions. We will try to look for raised hands, use your reaction icons, or put something in the chat that you have a question or what your question is. Either way, we can state your question or you can state it yourself. We can recognize you to state that. I will open up with one question. So we've been talking, I guess, a lot about those jobs directly at the factory, at the chip fabs. Um, how will and it's possible that some of the community impact report does deal with supply chain jobs that are directly, related to the chips manufacturing. But what about other jobs in the community that the project will spur, whether they're, hotel workers, um, construction and, off project uh, uh, entities like hotels, for example. How will those jobs, the indirect jobs, be tracked? Does anybody have any insight into that or any concerns about that, or maybe it's not something that is possible to be directly attributed? And Tyler or Khadeejah, are you able to address that issue?
I will just say from what I understand, Remy put out in conjunction with Micron this study that promised those other satellite jobs, like right, the opportunities. However, Micron doesn't take responsibility in being able to attract them. It's more so that with this investment coming in and their satellite companies that will be coming in for semiconductor industry, with the community revitalizing, will attract more jobs. So there, as of right now, is no way to track um, those additional jobs that they anticipate will come as a result of Micron being here, in short.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe it's something that we need to put on our agenda as and our thinking caps about that, so that um, we can see the impact in the community of this massive once in a lifetime investment. Are there any other questions that the audience has? I think I can see all of your icons, your names here. So if you raise your hand, I can try to. I see Don Hughes has a hand up.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm wondering, at this point, have folks reached out to Micron directly? Are there conversations going on with them at this point?
So we have had some preliminary conversations with Micron, and that is where I stress hearing this announcement as a bit of alarming, because we have not been pulled to the appropriate tables as of yet. Um, my hope is that when we get more community input and involvement, that'll strengthen our ability to sit at these relevant seats. So we're in conversation. There are no commitments. We're hoping to be able to work with Micron and whoever else they've roped in um, to set these workforce equity goals.
Hmm.
Tyler, in relation to that, what about the county? How have you had interaction with the county economic development folks?
We have not. The county is very difficult to penetrate, and so no, not on the county level yet.
Okay, great. Um, if there are others, please raise your hand. And I see Sarah's got her hand up.
Um, this may be a little bit premature, but I wonder if there is a plan or if it would be worth sort of lobbying for local legislation to get some of these protections in place. Maybe too late for Micron, but if we have local legislation, such as the city of Syracuse has a human rights ordinance, which is, the New York State human rights law has kind of overtaken that, but like sort of local ordinances or legislation that could help, at least be helpful towards some of these job protections that we're talking about here. Because I think it's cool that we're, gonna be signing that we've signed the petition and the platform, but I fear that Micron is not going to do things if they don't have a law requiring them to do things.
I would agree with you, and I apologize. I do have another commitment, so I will say that with this group here, I invite you to engage with our working group so that we can strategize on these next steps. Because I do agree, Sarah, with you, and I think I'll let Dick or Khadijah go a little bit more into depth on strategy. Thank you all for your time. I've put my contact information in the chat if you need to connect offline.
Thank you very much, Tylah. We appreciate you being here today.
To Sarah's question, we've definitely thought, we started to think a little bit about like what potential legislative or state level, strategy we can shift to now that the federal government has signed that contract. It's really like up to the state to sort of carry some of these asks forward. So we have started setting up some meetings with electeds and making sure that they're aware of the work and getting, their support, and also some strategy talks with them. And yeah, the idea of filing legislation, we've definitely thought about it internally, but I think we're still trying to figure out like what exact leverage points exist. So if folks have ideas and want to, be part of that discussion, like, please feel free to reach out. I can also put my contact information in the chat, and yeah, it's a work in progress at the moment.
Great. Thank you. Khadeejah, maybe a question about worker health and safety. I'm wondering how much you're emphasizing and investigating those issues, and whether or not, and maybe you stated it in your remarks, whether or not JMA's interest and perspective on the worker health and safety is correlated with what has been stated in the community impact report. Is it too soon to comment on that at this point?
I haven't I'm not an expert on the impact report yet, as it was just, released on Tuesday, but I will say that our platform specifically does ask that like the best and the highest state of the art health safety protocols be implemented. I am still trying to figure out what Micron's contract with the DOC requires of them in terms of OSHA in New York and safety protocols in New York. And I think our team is trying to look at like, are there any differences between what they're requiring in Idaho versus New York, and which ones are higher standards. But I know the position of the platform is to be as safe as possible, and to even like consider phasing out some of those chemicals and replacing, exposure limits with stronger protective exposure standards.
Right. Thank you. Peter King has his hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, my question just very briefly, have people gotten some reaction from Center State CEO on this, and or even MACNY, Manufacturers Association? Do we have an idea where they stand on this?
I know Tylah has been in conversations with them, so unfortunately she just left, but I think as far as I know, conversations have been sort of just surface level talk, and again, nothing in commitment. And for Urban Jobs, who's been sort of asking for a seat at the table in these conversations, they haven't really felt as included as they were hoping they would be. So You know, I'm not sure what the latest engagement with them was, but I think Tyler would know that more. Dick, do you
This,
know?
No, so I'm sorry. By the way, sorry, I can't get my camera to work either. Somebody shut it off. I agree with Sarah that Center State, well, I can't speak for Center State CEO, but I doubt if MACME is very union friendly. So it's interesting that they placed that piece of it, the apprenticeship piece, inside of the manufacturing association. So I don't know. I just literally the information about that has actually just been made public 2 days ago, so we haven't had a chance really to really dig into it. Maybe Glenn has more information. I don't.
Of course, just offering the idea, the concept that MACD has had difficulty, if I'm correct, I don't know, difficulty in finding enough workforce just for their, existing uh, facilities around Syracuse, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it seems as if sort of the next steps that for the groups that are kind of like on the outside of the project at this point, needs to be to kind of force that engagement with whether it's the county or whether it's MACNY or Center State CEO or maybe the community foundation as well, who are named in the community impact report to try to engage with them, and maybe we could try to arrange a future one of our green bag lunch presentations to engage with them and see what avenues might exist. Annalise has her hand up.
Oh, hi there. Thank you, John. I just wanted to know, do you guys know if Micron has any other forums planned for next year besides the job topic? Because like in regard to the environment, it would be interesting, particularly, like the capacity that for the water that they need, especially because I think, if, and I could be wrong, but considering that some areas in the country are dealing with water shortages, like they do seem to be using a particularly large amount of water. So, just wanted to know if you guys know of any forums that they'll have next year.
Yeah, I mean, good question in terms of the environmental aspects. From what I understand, some reporting that I read online, apparently December 20th was a target date that has been laid down for Micron to submit a draft of the environmental impact statement. Whether that means it's not everything or parts of it or whatever, but the aside from the jobs issues that have been dealt with by Commerce in this community impact report, there are a number of permits that need to be issued, and they will be subject of this environmental impact report. I know Glenn was with us, or I think Glenn is still here with us, but he uh, uh, penned himself or with his colleagues at Syracuse.com a very short, concise article that dealt with the status of things and a list of the other approvals that are needed that look, will likely come under the environmental impact statement as well as the New York State seeker process. I can just read down here the EPA and DEC air toxic emission permits, the Onondaga County wastewater treatment system, the construction of the railroad spur, the Empire, I think we talked a little bit about this one today. The Empire Development Agent, the State Empire Development Agency, the tax credits that have to get dealt with, site plan and other local reviews by the town of Clay still must be dealt with, and then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and even the Corps of Engineers relative to the endangered species and the filling of the wetlands. So there's a lot going on there. And again, left off that list, Annalise, is the development of for this plant in Clay, the water system that will need to bring 48 million gallons a day, from what I understand, to the plant for its use. So lots of water that is used by these chip manufacturing. Don, is your hand back up?
My hand is back up. Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering if I could just speak to the environmental side of this for a bit. The a lot of the environmental requirements are going to be established within the framework of the environmental impact statement. So it's super important that people get involved in that process. Like you say, it's expected to be released in a matter of a week. I would expect the whole thing to come out at once. And if I could have just a couple minutes, I would like people to see the environmental part of the agreement that came from the CHIPS office. Would it be possible for me to share the screen?
Make him co-host.
Okie dokie, hang on.
Yeah, what Don is referring to is the paragraph that is in the community impact report, or maybe it's more than one paragraph that deals with the environmental issues that still need to be dealt with.
Okay, Don, you can go ahead and
Okay,
share your screen.
got it. And that's beautiful Lemoyne in a summer day. Let me get to that. There is, I can get to the next thing. Where is it? Give me a break. CHIPS. Here it is. Can you see that? The CHIPS environmental commitments. So this is the announcement that came out from Department of Commerce, and there's some generic stuff that applies to both the New York project and of course Micron is expanding their facility out in Boise, Idaho. This first one is about indirect greenhouse. That means basically electricity. And so they're going to use power purchase agreements, PPAs, and renewable energy certificates. So there's no commitment here for them to build any new renewable energy. And notice carbon-free electricity. That includes nuclear energy. So beware. The governor has embarked on a mission to look into building new nuclear plants in New York State. Water conservation strategies, that's a good thing. So we're talking about massive use of water. This hopefully will reduce it. This is just reporting requirements. And this last thing is simply saying they're not going to violate the law, which is kind of meaningless. And then there's all this stuff about Idaho, but the part I really want to focus on is this. So they're the lead agency. They're doing this environmental impact statement for the New York facility. And as a condition of its award, the office is requiring that they commit to implement any mitigation measures identified in the NEPA process for the New York projects. So that's the environmental impact statement. So that's key. We want to get as much environmental commitments as possible in that process. I don't know how much time they're going to give us to comment.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm seeing. Where did you get this, Don? Is that something that the public can get access to read over it themselves?
Sure, I could put this link right in the chat. It's posted publicly.
Okay. Well, the only other thing that okay, so just because I was reading about the bats, I think that's quite interesting that they said that they're going to try to stay in compliance so they don't affect the endangered species, but they would be cutting down a lot of trees in that area, which would be affecting two endangered species of bats.
Correct.
I mean, I don't even know. I guess there's so many loopholes. I don't know.
I think the strategy is that they have to try to provide habitat somewhere else for the bats to establish new colonies. I think that's
Oh,
the basic
oh,
idea.
that might be it. And also, because I know I read that the reason why they delayed it to November is because they don't want to cut the trees down while the bats are there. But then when the
Correct.
bats come out of hibernation, where would they be going? So I guess to your point.
Exactly. Right. I don't know. I don't know how you do this. There's going to be a lot of environmental destruction with the construction of this facility. There's no question. 200 acres of wetlands directly impacted. Adjacent wetlands, I'm sure, are going to get impacted. And when I say impacted, what I really mean is filled in and destroyed. So that's direct, and the adjacent ones will be affected by the changes in hydrology. They're bringing in massive amounts of fill material. Think about Solvay. They're going to turn the town of Clay into a new Solvay.
Yeah. I see that Dick has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm just responding to Andy's question about solar panels on the roof. Early on, maybe over a year ago, there was a meeting a meeting with Micron where that was raised by community people, and they pushed back and said they were concerned about damage to the roofs, et cetera, et cetera. The other issue is the amount of electricity that solar panels would even create on the roofs of the building is relatively small compared to their usage. So it wouldn't really make a significant dent in their electric requirements. And I did, and obviously, Glenn, I didn't read your article, but maybe you can give us more details about that.
Oh, my apologies. I was just gonna say, I'm sorry. Why, if they're trying to be environmentally friendly, doesn't it make sense that they utilize every option, even if they don't think it? I mean, those solar panels could probably be dedicated to like offices and not necessarily the machinery, because I could understand that, but for them to just not consider it at all, that makes me feel like they're not necessarily being as environmentally friendly as they're saying they can be, that they are being.
I would agree.
I'm just catching up with the chat, and I noticed that there was a question in here and by from Anne, who kind of talks about some of the softer services that kind of relate to the increase in population and jobs, and that's the medical the medical care, the healthcare facilities that may have to go. Does anybody have any insight into that? I know that we raised that question in through the environmental impact process to have that evaluated, and what will be the impact on the community, in terms of medical facilities. And Anne also raises the question about local food service. I'm not quite sure what she means by that, and in terms of said as food supply, warehousing, and distribution, impacts given population increase. Andy, you want to address that, or if before we ask our panelists to for any information they have?
Having worked at Carrier Corporation for 10 years, I have some experience in how many people are injured on their job every day. I don't know what kind of circumstances workers will face when they begin working, but it was always an issue. Accidents happen. And I was just wondering what kind of service we can expect. And Clay, I mean, Carrier was not far from the hospitals in Syracuse, but Clay is a different matter. Also, there were problems in food service. My daughter has worked in food service for decades, and it was always an issue of the larger companies like Sudoku or Sedeco, I forget what it was called, and other companies and problems that arose. I'm just wondering if it's mentioned at all in any of the documents.
It's not in our platform directly, but I do want to say regarding the food services issue, if the labor neutrality language is agreed to, that lays the groundwork for, unionized labor in all aspects, like not just the folks that work at Micron directly, but then even the food services contracts that they do. It would lay the groundwork for that to be easier to be unionized. So while we don't explicitly list that in our platform, the idea is definitely for that to be the case.
Thank you.
Yeah, Khadeejah, what about medical facilities at the plant? I suppose any kind of union negotiation could deal with that need for those services as well. So ready access to, first aid or first responders at a plant that's going to have 3,000 people working at any one time at the facility.
That's a really interesting point, and I have to say we haven't discussed that in our working group yet, but I think it's something that we should talk about and see how we can uplift that, what spaces we can advocate for that in.
Right.
Okay.
I think I see Don's hand raised.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about that relates to the use of chemicals and worker safety and the environment. One of the big class of chemicals of concern is the PFAS, the forever chemicals. And it's all well and good to say that they're going to meet the regulations and go beyond regulations and regulatory standards, but there essentially are no standards for PFAS. There's no, for example, DEC has not regulated any source for PFAS emissions, either to the air or the water. It's simply not there. That's because the regulations are lacking. And there's thousands of varieties of these things. And some of them are extremely toxic, and some are only very toxic. So, and the new administration in Washington is probably not going to be super, how shall I say, supportive of environmental standards for these compounds or worker safety for that matter. So it's a big area of concern that I have.
Right. And
Do you
of
know of any
course,
efforts around like any legislative efforts or any kind of efforts like around creating standards or, as you said, there aren't any, so. what's the thinking right now in terms of like how do we deal with that problem?
There's some support, some legislation that's been introduced in New York State for limiting the use of PFAS, and to promote the creation of standards. But that is yet to be passed. And keep in mind, there's a long lead time between passing legislation, getting it signed by the governor, handing it off to the appropriate regulatory agency, probably the DEC, and them actually implementing anything. So DEC is working on wastewater regulations, and they've been working on it for, I don't know, a couple of years now.
I would like to add on to what Don said. For like the PFAS Action Act, that's a bill that they're working on, but they need to have more co-sponsors for it to pass the House. I believe it's in right now. And so that would be the first step, but we need more co-sponsors for it to proceed. So yeah. And aside
Annalise, so you're talking about New York State?
Yeah, it includes New York State because that's what Food and Water Watch they've been working on. So that's one of the things that they've been working on.
But the act that you reference is something introduced in the legislature and the New York State legislature.
Indeed, it's a bipartisan bill.
Hmm.
And so like aside from that though, with the EPA, what they did pass the six forever chemicals, but then there's people lobbying to roll back those regulations. So yeah. Who kn- I if we
That's for
can-
drinking water.
Correct.
So it does not directly affect, even though if those were not rolled back, it does not directly affect discharges into the environment.
That is true. Good point. Thank you for redirecting me, Don.
No problem. Glenn's got his hand up.
Uh, who is that, Don?
Glenn,
Glenn.
I just
Go ahead.
wanted to note that during the discussion, I put a number of links into the chat regarding some specific topics that you guys have mentioned that I've written about, including PFAS and the scoping document and et cetera. So if you want to take a look at those, at some point, I'll answer some of your questions. So.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I was just looking at that list there and was going to give you the shout out for putting them in. Particularly, you provided some clarification about the medical services, and that might be not being reviewed as part of the environmental impact statement. So I do encourage people to take a look at that list in the chat. Glenn has been very helpful this morning and putting that information there for us to take a look at. I appreciate it. We're almost out of time. A couple of minutes left in our usual time of 90 minutes. We did have a little break, a little waste of time where somebody bombed our Zoom. I think it's one of the first times that I remember that somebody has bombed our Zoom. So I think Greening USA needs to take a look at how that may have happened, or what is possible to be done to avoid such things, if anything. But certainly our apologies for that having taken place today. I do appreciate everybody being here. I don't see any other hands. So,
yeah, hey, John,
yes. Oh, go ahead.
this is a quick tip. I don't know if it's because I'm a co-host or not, but if you go into your chat in the upper right-hand corner, there's some three dots. If you click on them, you can save the entire chat discussion to your computer, which includes all the links and all the conversation. I think that should be available to everybody if you want to check that out.
Yeah, everybody should be able to save their chat,
Right.
and basically just clicking on that puts it in. I think your Zoom download file, which is usually automatically created for
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah.
hopefully you can find it later.
Yeah.
And to our speakers, thank you very much for your being here today and volunteering your time to help us understand some of these issues. The rest of us, we have a lot of work to do. So I think it's only just beginning. We have to roll up our sleeves and get together. A lot of good issues raised here today, both on the jobs front and on the environmental front that need attention to make sure that this project comes out as sustainable as possible and accomplishes the objectives for our community. So with that, I wish you all happy holidays. I look forward to seeing you in January, and I'll just give you a previous or a preview of what we're going to have. Ethan Gromley of Citizen Action and New York Renews will be leading a presentation on the climate issues that we're facing in the coming year. And so you'll want to certainly look for our notices about that in the coming weeks. So
Do you
with
have a
that,
date for that, John?
yes, I think I think it's going to be the second Friday, which should be January 10th.
10th. Okay, thank you.
Ooh, John, would it be okay if I just mentioned that they'll also be having uh a climate mass mobilization event on the 22nd? They're
Yes, that's the January 22nd you're referring to.
Yes, they'll be going to Albany to do some lobbying. So
Right. And I think we'll hear more about that from Ethan when he joins us to talk about that. But yes, then there's probably information that's been put out already. So yes, pay attention to that at that lobby event if you're interested in that sort of activism.
yeah, I can put the event thing in the link chat.
Sure. All right. Well, as I said, happy holidays to all, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us. And I want to say thank you to Greening USA for publicly endorsing our platform. We really appreciate the support.
Oh, you're welcome. It
Great.
matches up with our 12 traits of a sustainable community. And so we were happy to join in with others in supporting that. I'm going to look down at Annalise has got that in there already. Yep, she's got it in there. So you can save the chat again and have all of it. Thank you very much for everybody being here today. We appreciate you and what you do.
Thank you.
Joy.